Death is difficult, but inevitable. That's how we want to remind you that it doesn't have to be so scary. Our mission is to educate, center, and intrigue you while making tasteful humor along the way. Welcome to another episode of Home is Where the Grave Is. We are your hosts, Dulce.
And I'm Unity. Join us in our journey to educate, intrigue, and center ourselves on the subject of death and what comes after. Hello.
Hello. Good to see you. I have a cockatiel trying to tear apart my laptop as we speak. Yeah, there he is.
I could see him. He did considerable damage last time.
He did. Little villain. This is the culprit. And that's where he sits, in front, not quite in front of the camera, but he's on the laptop.
I see your kitty cat too, trying to join us.
Say hi, Senorita Chang. Yes, that's her name. Used to be Senor Chang before we realized she was a girl.
The character off of Community, right? The show?
Yes. Yes.
Love it.
So have you been?
I've been good. Today, after work, went to the Indian Bazaar shop in Franklin. It was really nice.
Mm-hmm.
I got to be surrounded by my people that I don't think quite accept me.
Why? Is it because you're too white?
I don't know. I'm pale and I stand out. I know I don't quite fit. And I don't speak the language. So that's, yeah.
Welcome to being in the middle. The classic
always
second generation immigrant story.
Always never fitting anywhere, but I think that's just the end of the story. Never quite fitting anywhere.
Which is why we became friends, because we're both second generation.
Woo!
Woo!
Whoop, whoop.
So anyways, is there anything else going on?
Well,
it is July.
It is. So by the end of this month, we're going to be going to the Oddities Expo.
Oddities and Curiosities.
Yeah, that's going to be exciting. Nothing else super major for this month, I don't think. What about you? What's going on with you? I think you have some major news.
Did buy a fetal, taxidermied pig. Found it on Facebook Marketplace.
Talk about that.
Only $15. The price in the back is still there, so it was originally $50 because this stuff is obviously expensive. So I was like, score. It came with a free cow skull and a bunch of miscellaneous bones.
Ooh.
So I had a good day 2 days ago.
Very cool. So what drew you to this? What drew you to want to get this taxidermied pig?
It was cheap.
Just because it was cheap? Not
yes.
Because you like taxidermy?
Yes, that too. But it was cheap. Bought it in a heartbeat. Didn't even have to think about it. Made the 30-minute drive to make sure I picked it up right before work. And made sure I got ready earlier so I can make sure I had plenty of time to get ready, drive there, then get to work on time with my fetal pig in the back seat.
Ew.
And in jungle, I hope no customers looked in my back seat and saw freaking cow skull and a fetal pig.
At least it warded off anybody that may have even thought about looking at your car.
If you look at my car, it's just disaster and a dead pig and a dead cow.
Yeah, I would be concerned. Your birdie is just attacking your thumb, just going ham.
He needs a partner.
It does. So
anyways, I plan on continuing my collection.
I love it. Can't wait to see it. Can't wait to see how you decorate too.
So Unity, what is today's topic about?
So today is a little bit more of a serious topic. We're going to be talking about the very unfortunate times of when parents lose or a mother loses her baby. Or when babies die. So that's going to be a sensitive topic for today.
Yes, trigger warning to anyone who is sensitive about this topic, because it is I know it's probably going to be one of the most serious topics we talk about, because, I mean, what's more serious than a baby dying,
Yeah,
literally? Probably up there on one of the worst things that a human being can experience.
absolutely. And this information is coming from like us who don't have kids.
Yes.
But we did do our research and take things from people who have had kids and lost them and spoke about it. So we're just relaying
Yes.
the messages.
That's what any good journalist, reporter, writer does, is talk to people that have actually experienced this so that we can accurately relay their experiences and provide something that is actually educational.
Absolutely.
So,
Do you want to introduce it or do you want me to introduce?
I can start.
Go for it.
So, like we said, today's episode is what happens when a baby dies. Obviously, like we said, a child's death is one of the worst tragedies to happen to a family. A baby's death, even more so, particularly because they didn't even get to live very long. Not only are the parents affected, but so are their families and friends who all once shared in that joy, and they now share in that pain. And I just wanted to note that a little bit, because think about all the work that goes in the pregnant months of pregnancy, getting ready for the baby, like making sure a whole room is like, and then buying all the stuff the baby needs, and then there's no baby. Like, that's gonna be like horribly tragic. Like, everyone's expecting a baby and then there's no baby. It's kind of like, what do you do when you had all of this planned and then that was just like taken out from underneath you, right?
Absolutely.
And we're more so talking about like natural deaths. We're not talking like murder or neglect or something, because regular people lose children to unfortunate accidents or circumstances. Like with so many natural hazards, a baby's death can be attributed to anything from accidental death to sudden infant death syndrome, or the unexplained death of a seemingly healthy infant. So sudden infant death syndrome, or SIDS, researchers still don't know what causes it. But there are ongoing studies right now where researchers are starting to see that some connections, like SIDS, might be possibly associated with problems in the ability of the baby to rouse from sleep, to detect low levels of oxygen or buildup of carbon dioxide in the blood. When babies sleep face down, they may rebreathe exhaled carbon dioxide, according to the Boston Children's Hospital. SIDS typically occurs in the infant's first 6 months to a year of life. So I can see how that's absolutely terrifying when you're a parent. It's like between for a whole year of your child's life, they could die at any moment. And a neonatal death is when the death occurs within the first 28 days of life. So, Unity, can you introduce the next part?
Yeah, and that's incredibly scary. Just some other additional facts about SIDS as well, from what we do know. These are some factors for SIDS that carry additional risk. So placing a baby on their side or stomach to sleep rather than on their back. I believe that's something that I need to double check that one. I think that's something that's changed recently, is that it either way, premature or low birth weight babies, overheating the baby during sleep. So too many blankets, too many clothes in addition with the blankets. Then you've got sleeping on too soft of a surface with those blankets and bumper pads. It's just, there's a lot of stuff that's in there with them that they think may contribute to the SIDS. Having a sibling who died of SIDS or a family history of failure to thrive is possible indicator as well. But while SIDS can affect any family, it often strikes babies whose mothers are typically under 20 years of age when their babies are born, smoke during pregnancy, and have received little to no prenatal care to kind of maybe catch some diseases or issues the babies may be occurring.
And I'm sure a lot of people know that if a baby can't raise his head yet, when they're particularly young, that's why you definitely don't need to be putting them on their stomach because they can't raise their head, so they will suffocate.
Right. True. Very true. But there's some good news that comes with the death rate of SIDS, because it's been on the decline from about 130.3 deaths per 100,000. Statistics for you guys, from 100,000 live births in 1990. Okay, so this is about 32 years ago. Now in 2019, the death rate has declined from 130 down to 36.4 deaths per 100,000. That's a pretty drastic change, and that's according to the Center for Disease Control, CDC, in the United States.
I'm sure a lot of that is continuing research and continuing support for mothers. Like we said, that neonatal care is very important for mothers to be receiving those extra vitamins and just additional care before and after the baby has been born.
Absolutely. And I think with the rise of like nanny cams and mothers, like parents constantly checking on their kids, especially during that first period coming from the hospital back home with the baby, I think along with all that, it's definitely made some big changes, which is great. Because that's absolutely devastating to have to break that to a parent, that especially when a parent calls EMS because their baby isn't breathing and EMS tries to do everything that they can, and then you have to break that news to the parent who is just devastated. It is terrible. It is really terrible. But any death of an infant is devastating regardless. For the parents and family members, they may go through some emotions. First, typically, is like shock, denial, anger, guilt, and profound sadness, of course. Mourning parents and relatives may need assistance in navigating their sudden loss, such as grief. Grief counseling is really good for them. Support groups, therapy, and resources to assist with the funeral and memorial arrangements. That's a big deal after dealing with that initial, all those strong emotions. Parents can share their stories in their online communities at shareyourstory.org as well.
So when a baby dies, especially if they're pronounced dead in the hospital, there's this series of things that may happen and that you may choose to do if you're the parent in this circumstance. Staff may offer the family time alone with the infant because people have noted that this is really important for them to be able to mourn. They use this time to either create memories, such as memories that acknowledge their baby's existence and recognize their place in the family, since this will be the first and last time that you ever see the infant. During this time, the family may take photos, make hand and footprints, and anything else that would bring them comfort in the future. There's an organization called Now I Lay Me Down to Sleep, which is a network of remembrance photographers who offer free services to parents experiencing the loss of an infant. And I actually found out about them, a long time ago, and thought that was absolutely amazing, and how much the parents talked about how this helped them. Because like I know of what we talked about with postmortem photography, this will be the only photo of the child that had ever existed.
Yeah, that's really sweet. And I do like the idea of the parents being able to have that moment with the child and mourn. And I mean, not everyone feels that way. Like, from a personal story, my mom had she had a stillbirth. And when the baby actually, she birthed it, she didn't want to see it. And a lot of mothers feel like that too, because that's so much pain that you don't want to deal with. And there's guilt, there's shame, there's a mixture of many emotions. But for those that want to, I think that's really great.
Well, I think that's just kind of where the hospital's supposed to come in, because they are the experts and they have seen this countless of times, so they know what are some of the assistance they can immediately offer parents to help them navigate this.
Absolutely.
And then some parents may even take their baby home to grieve, like it's the same thing as bringing a body home for a home burial, except this is just to extra moments, additional moments for the family to be able to spend some private time with the infant. Hospital staff may even offer to send a specialist to assist them, especially if this is a baby that died after, weeks of being in their care, the emergency room, or in the ICU. Did I say that correctly?
Yeah,
right?
the ICU.
And ICU.
Maybe the NICU for babies.
NICU and ICU. That's what I was trying to say. And an autopsy is not required if health providers believe the infant died from natural causes. Obviously, if they think it was murder, a health provider would mention, and then that would start an investigation. But if they thought the infant died from natural causes, they don't typically require an autopsy. Parents may request one to find out the exact cause of death, such as disease or injuries, which is... It sucks that you have to think about that, but like for parents that are considering children in the future, especially if it's their first one, it'd be nice to know if this was like something genetic, just to know why, just in case if you want future children, this could happen again. An autopsy does cost money though, so medical providers could instead do like genetic tests, x-rays, and tests on the placenta and umbilical cord to see if they can find any cause of death. And this and other measures are done to learn whether there's the risk that the future children could inherit the same issues. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you stop having kids, if you think it's going to happen again. It just means the doctors would be better prepared to prevent the child from dying from like sudden infant death syndrome,
That's understandable.
Yeah. So they can be like on the lookout, keep the baby monitored more closely.
Yeah.
To prevent SIDS. A genetic counselor may also be a good resource. That sucks though.
Yeah.
Think about like, you have to think about that when you find a partner and decide to have children with them. It's like, how are your genetics going to mix, and what risks are they going to cause to your future children?
I think realistically though, we don't consider that or like think about that until it's happening to us, and then we have to look at those events, information. What am I trying to say here?
I'm gonna think about it now. Like, haven't they said something about if you and your partner don't have the same blood type, you're like prone to more issues? And then what if your partner has sickle cell anemia in there? Like I would seriously reconsider.
So after all of that, which I think is really good because these professionals in their fields, depending on all the parent has to say is this is what we want, or this is what we're kind of thinking about, and those professionals are on it. They jump right into it, because the less the parents have to figure this stuff out for themselves, the better, and the easier it is to grieve. Because this, like we said, this is heavy. So now it's time to take into considerations the after death care, the funeral. So if the parents want a funeral, a burial, burial or cremation, when it comes to infant deaths, many funeral directors offer special and reduced price services. But for other families, the death of an infant is not only an untimely loss, but a financial emergency, because now you're having to think about almost $10,000 or more. Like, how am I going to pay for this? And plus the hospital bill on top of that, which is thousands of dollars.
Hopefully it's covered under Children's Hospital or Medicare or whatever child insurance that your state may offer. Hopefully, but those are two. Not always.
Yeah, those are two gigantic bills you got to think about now, and you weren't planning for that. So, fortunately, there is a solution for this that the certain states help with, or certain counties within those states. Numerous towns, counties, and states have special cemeteries just for children under a certain age, typically infants. These services are either at reduced prices or completely free for residents at poverty levels.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, here in Nashville, Tennessee, the Calvary Cemetery offers free burials for families who lost infants at less than a year of age. A special section of the cemetery is dedicated solely for the infants, called Garden of Angels.
And so this is how this whole topic got started because of my direct experiences with my friend who lost her infant from sudden infant death syndrome. And so, yeah, it was very sudden. Came out of nowhere. Her infant was very healthy. I remember when I saw her in her coffin, she was a pudgy, normal looking baby, very adorable. Unfortunately, she was in a coffin. And my friend was not from well-to-do. She was poverty level. She had just come out of she and her husband were still struggling. And so that's how they learned that there was this cemetery that would allow them a safe place, a beautiful place to bury their infant and help them through this horrible tragedy that they were going through. So it was a horrible tragedy. Apparently, it was a natural death. There was nothing that neither she nor her husband could have done to prevent it. And so it was really nice to have so many people offering to help and having this cemetery that would be able to be the place that she could bury her child and visit on the anniversary of its death every year.
That is really nice. It's really appreciated that regardless of your financial situation, you can still receive some kind of help, some kind of human rights.
Mm-hmm. Incidentally, I've actually been to 2 infant funerals.
Wow.
That shouldn't be normal, right?
No, because I don't.
And
it's funny because I've had to be part of at least once, I've had to be part of a give the bad news to the parents because of SIDS, but I've never been to an infant funeral.
I happened to my coworker and my friend. They lost infants. They were both considered natural causes, from what I remember. With my coworker, I believe they thought one of what it caused it was that the girlfriend was a smoker when the child, when she was pregnant, and then he was co-sleeping with the child. So we don't know if that actually ended up causing anything too. It's just really sad.
It is.
He was very torn up. I remember he's been torn up for years. I think it still bothers him.
And see, this is why the grief counseling intervention is so important, or even having group therapy sessions or people that have experienced the same thing that you have, because all you're going to do is torture yourself. And there's no way you can't not torture yourself with your own emotions. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so it's really important to not shut yourself in and away from people. It's important to surround yourself with people that do understand what you're going through, so that way you can work through this, you can process it. Yep.
Well, other states, Tennessee's not the only one that offers this. There are. So if you or someone you know is going through this, make sure you typically ask the hospitals. They'll know, definitely. They'll know where to, or at least where they could point you in the right direction. For instance, in Texas, the Department of Health Services offers a program called the Infant and Fetal Burial Plot Program, providing free burial plots for infants and fetuses at state-owned cemeteries. In New York, some municipalities and counties have programs in place to provide free or discounted cemetery plots for babies. For instance, New York City offers free burial services for stillborn babies and infants up to 24 weeks of gestation at city-owned cemeteries. In Ohio, there's also free cemetery plots. And in Florida, some counties, such as Miami-Dade County, there are free or discounted burial services for infants and stillborn babies. But like I said before, some funeral directors are willing to work with families because it's, tragic. It's an infant. They didn't live very long, and the family still processing all this. It's always sad to see those little tiny coffins.
Yeah. I just hope that, I mean, it's really great that we have these states, but that's 1, 2, 3, 4, that's 5 states out of 50?
Hopefully there's more. I'm sure there's more.
It just, yeah, I really do hope. And if not, then I really hope a movement starts where we can start having more states have this.
Well, this is something that's happened to just about somebody that they know. So I'm sure that every state's considered how to help these families out.
And it's interesting. I know we're not talking about miscarriages because it's so similar. It's so similar to this, but there is a special tribute to miscarriages and how often that happens and how for so long it's been a taboo to talk about. Because it was always made to be part of a failure of the mothers because she couldn't carry to term, which is pretty terrible. And I'm glad in recent decades that a lot of that has shifted. There's still a lot of shame. There's a lot of guilt and pain that comes with that, of course, but it's good to see that change coming about.
Daddy's health also impacts the pregnancy.
True.
It isn't just all on the mom.
True. You got to have some encouragement there. You got to have support.
Well, I mean, like him being in his physical health while impregnating the woman does impact the pregnancy as well. You know. Yeah, and then obviously him supporting. And then if, it's not always have to be a man, it could be a same-sex relationship. But.
True. It's not just secluded or, what's the word I'm looking for? Reserved. It's not just reserved for heterosexual couples.
Yep. This can happen to anybody.
Yep. So it's important to note that the experience and aftermath of a baby's death can be deeply personal and unique to each situation. Counselors warn that the weeks and months after an infant's death, parents will experience intense feelings. The pain will fade over time, but won't disappear. Instead, will only become less intense. Birthdays, holidays, and anniversaries of the child's death will continue to remind families of their loss. But with time and counseling, the painful days will become less frequent. If you or someone you know is dealing with a loss of a baby, it is advisable to seek support from healthcare professionals, counselors, support groups, or other appropriate resources that can provide guidance and assistance during this difficult time.
So, something that I also wanted to mention, I remember reading that parents realized that there was kind of a stigma over talking about the loss of a baby. Like nobody wanted to talk about it or hear about it because I think it's like such a difficult thing to think about.
It is.
Like it's such a horrible thing to think about. And so parents who lost children would find it difficult to be able to even trying to find comfort from their own families and friends when they lost a baby, which would, cause them even further issues via not being able to try to find some sort of way to memorialize the child. Everybody else just wants to move on quickly. And something else that you kind of mentioned before, miscarriages are also still the loss of a child. How many women have you talked to that still talk about a miscarriage that they had years ago?
Oh yeah.
Like my mother still to this day talks about the child that she miscarried between me and my brother. So that was like 30 years ago,
Yeah.
She still talks about him. She still remembers. She wonders what he would have been like. She remembers clearly how he looked because he was like a couple of weeks. And she remembers exactly where she buried him. And And I remember reading that there's also a stigma surrounding miscarriages.
Yes.
Like, people don't want to take them seriously, but there are emotions behind it. And, if you have a miscarriage and you are impacted by that miscarriage, then your feelings are valid,
Absolutely.
And no one should be telling you that you don't have the right to feel sad that you lost a child, especially people who were trying to get pregnant, who really wanted that child, and they weren't able to carry it to fruition.
Yes.
And like you said, there's feelings of guilt. It's terrible. Like, I don't know how that's where that you really need counselors and therapy, because I can see some of these parents really going deep into feeling guilty that the child's death was attributed to them for some reason, like with SIDS, like with my friend, I always got the feeling that she always kind of blamed herself because she wasn't checking in on the child as often as enough, that she should have sent something, that she wishes she must have not had that strong motherly bond, because otherwise she should have been able to sense there's something wrong. They did eventually have a second child, and when I was visiting them, they would constantly be checking on the child, sleeping in its chair. Like, the child wasn't snoring, they would freak out, immediately go like reposition him because of that trauma still there.
I can imagine that. That's never leaving them. Yeah.
And then for some parents, this is what ends up destroying their relationship.
Yep.
When there's no child and it's just a lot of grief and guilt, then it eventually leads to separation.
Because as we know,
you're taking out your anger on each other.
Because like we know, hurt people hurt other people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a good point that you mentioned too, was that when people going to this denial phase where they don't want to talk about it, let's not mention it, let's not think about it again, that's pretty detrimental too, because just because you don't talk about it, nobody else talks about it, doesn't mean that it's not doing damage underneath the surface to your own emotions, to your own psyche. Even if you're trying to compartmentalize, it gets through to you no matter how hard you try to compartmentalize.
And so once again, we're talking about America's repulsion to talk about anything death related,
or emotions.
I remember when I was reading about Now I Lay Me Down to Sleep, the organization. These some people consider the photos grotesque because it is a dead infant that they're taking a picture of, with the parents. And like, it's morbid, it's disturbing, some people thought, and didn't really think about that the whole point of it was for the parents.
Yeah.
Obviously the parents wanted this, and not all the pictures are pretty. Sometimes the infant does look like an infant, sometimes it doesn't. It's not beautiful, but it's still a part of life, and it's something that we should be forcing ourselves to look at instead of pretending that it doesn't happen.
Oh, absolutely. I think it does take a I wouldn't recommend you sit down and you force yourself to look at all these pictures if you're having a averse feeling to it, but it does recommend that you sit down and you have a conversation with yourself, or you have a conversation with some other people that see things differently, so that you don't have such a large reaction against this, because especially if it's not happening to you, but you're having an adverse reaction to other people who choose to have that, that's messed up. Like, you need to have a conversation with yourself.
Well, if this happens to somebody that like, don't be afraid to reach out and ask them, do you want to talk about it?
Yeah.
You want me to, like, it's really what they need,
I think,
and if they want to talk, you should be able to be there for them.
Yeah. And just listen. Don't give advice. Don't tell them how to fix this. People just need to talk when they're ready.
It's like telling people, how do you not die from a tornado that nobody expected to come and bulldoze your house down? It's a natural disaster,
Yeah. That's a good one. can appreciate
You're
that.
not gonna be like, oh, you died because you didn't have a storm tornado shelter built in with the proper procedures and make sure that the walls were this thick.
Just constantly feed into that shame where you're like blaming the victim the entire time, you know?
Yep.
Yep. You know what I feel like right now? What is those what is that puppet? Wasn't there a puppet off of Muppets? Or like merp, 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 merp.
Meep.
Meep, meep, meep.
The scientist dude.
Yeah.
The scientist assistant.
That's what I feel like when we both go, yep, yep, yep.
Mm-hmm.
Merp.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. This was a tough episode, but there's a lot of good resources out there. There's a lot of good videos. There's a lot of good TED Talks and podcasts of like people that actually go through this and share their grief process. And that's the biggest way people make change. People open up is that maybe they don't open up first, but they hear someone else open up about their experience when they're ready. And so then they feel validated in their feelings and they can relate to that. And that's the biggest way a lot of us open up, is that we're able to relate to others that are brave enough to open up about some of their worst situations.
On Reddit, I do follow this subreddit called, I think it's Baby Loss. And it's just a community full of people talking with each other, comforting each other, and what they've done to process these deaths, especially on the anniversary of their child's death, kind of their traditions, how they've done to make sure that the child continues to be a part of their life. And it's absolutely like fascinating how like communities come together to help each other through this. Strangers, basically.
Yeah. It always brings us back. Community is what matters.
Community around death.
Community around death.
There's that there's a country that makes infants' tombs on trees.
Really?
And it's believed to be a way to comfort the child's soul. And that's something I wanted to ask you about is, what are some Indian traditions when it comes to infant deaths?
So yes, there are a couple of smaller traditions. It's more focused around the puja or the prayer that we do around the child or anybody who's passing. So for the Indian tradition for baby deaths, as a baby approaches death, the family will chant Ram, Ram, or Om, and recite from the Bhagavad Gita, which is our holy book, one of the holy books. The holy book for Hindus. A thread with religious significance may be tied around the wrist or neck of the baby. Stillborns need the same religious services as adults. So remember we talked about that a little bit, about what I wanted for my funeral when planning my funeral, on how the Hindu priest would be there and be reciting the puja. They would bathe the body in oils and butter and all that good stuff. Pretty much the same thing would happen for a stillborn. But in here it says the leaf from a tulsi, which is holy basil, that's a very religious plant for us, is placed on the baby's mouth, occasionally with a gold coin, depending on the area that you live in from India. So after a ritual wash, new clothes are put on the baby, who is subsequently wrapped in a white shroud. The body of the baby may be taken from the hospital straight to the crematory or cemetery for cremation. However, if the corpse is taken home, candles are lit and holy water from the river Ganges, or holy water in general, is sprinkled onto the body. So yeah, that's touching a little bit on the Hindu approach or the Indian approach with non-born babies and stillborns. What about you? What about for Mexico?
So in Mexico, the day before Day of the Dead, November 2nd is the main celebration, but the day before is known as Children's Day or Day of the Little Angels, Dia de los Angelitos. So parents who have lost children will spend this afternoon creating an altar in the graveyard or at their home, either inside or outside on the street. Items are left, such as favorite food, drinks, games, toys, balloons, footballs, anything that the child would have loved during when they were alive. And basically, it's a way to be able to continue to remember the child.
That's really sweet.
Every year, you know?
Yeah.
And I remember when the funeral I attended last year of a child, they released white balloons because white is the color of innocence, and that's typically attributed to children, especially the death of a child. And something else that I always thought was fascinating, I've seen post-mortem photography of Mexican children, you know, back in the early 1900s, and the infants were dressed as saints, as their patron saint.
Oh, wow.
And that was supposed to help with their souls get to heaven.
Oh. That's really sweet. I'd be interested to see how other cultures celebrate, specifically, you know, the passing of children before their time.
That will be another episode in the future.
You ready?
So let's wrap up. An infant's death is tragic, and especially natural causes. Fortunately, SIDS has declined over the last couple of years because there is research on trying to find out what is causing the death of a otherwise healthy baby. But there are a lot of services and communities of people who want to help families go through this grieving process, or that have gone through it themselves and are able to offer that comfort. There's a video game I just wanted to mention because I remembered this. Video game called Cancer, That Dragon Cancer, and a father created an entire video game to explore his experiences with his child that was going through cancer. I think the child got cancer like from an infant and ended up dying at like 4 years old. Like his entire lifetime was just spent battling cancer.
That's bittersweet.
So that was, so that was that father's way to be able to come to terms with this.
Wow, that's heavy, but beautiful at the same time. Yeah, I have nothing to add to that. That was a good ending there.
That's why our mission is to bring you the material and immaterial resources to help soothe some of your fears and grief.
That's right. And hey, don't forget to follow along for every new episode every single Monday on all major podcast platforms, to include YouTube. You can also, if you enjoy listening to us, join us on all of our socials. Check us out on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and you can even email us any stories, questions, or remarks at sweetprogressinc@gmail.com. Don't forget to check out our Etsy shop on your way out. Get some of that merch at Delicate Death. Until next time, stay alive.
Stay alive.